Hi, I'd like to welcome everybody to this edition of Polyphonic Voices. I am Jody Miller, the host of Polyphonic Voices, and I have with me here the music team, the Real Sisters, consisting of Kelly Brzezowski, right here in Lilburn, Georgia, and joining us via Zoom is Rosalind Buda, who is in Asheville, North Carolina. Welcome, ladies.
Thank you. We're excited.
Yes, thank you.
So I just met both of these wonderful musicians a few days ago as they taught for us at the Mountain Clay Game Early Music Workshop. Turns out Kelly and I have a past of having performed together back when I was much younger, and I was so delighted to know that we had done a couple of performances at Emory University for the Celtic Christmas concert. So the first thing I'd like to do is talk to both of you about your start in music. I think every person who is not a mainstream musician, not a classical musician by identification, tends to have a wonderful past and a great story. So I'd like to start with Kelly. Kelly, what brought you into music to start with?
My mom, for sure. Her family, no professional musicians in it, though my understanding is that Dolly Parton is a very distant cousin. I'm very proud of that.
Okay.
There's Partons out there in Texas. But my mom was very musical. We grew up singing in the kitchen, and everything from jazz to Irish music to the songs that I think her family thought were Irish but maybe had made up.
Okay.
They lived in a really fairly isolated part of Texas for several generations.
Okay.
After they came over from Ireland, and they spoke Irish that nobody could understand. So the language changed and the music changed over the generations in this little part of my family.
Oh, wow, that's very interesting.
So that's the tradition I grew up in.
Okay.
We sang everything from, Eartha Kitt to Appalachian music and everything in between.
Okay. Well, I recently did my genealogy profile through Ancestry.com, and I noticed that the swath that my own family took was down basically alongside the Appalachian Mountains, then across, and many of them have moved on out toward Texas. Did your family take a similar path? Do you have a clue about the further generations back?
They've been in the country so long, so long. There is a story in my mom's family about someone trying to murder one of the king's soldiers and having to flee Ireland at some point. I mean, the reality of this is probably that they threw a rock at a guard.
Yeah.
And got scared and got on a boat. There's no telling what actually happened at this point. But they kind of came in through the Northeast and down and around. There's some evidence that some of them were involved in starting the Trail of Tears and then moved out to Texas during that time period.
Okay, interesting. Mm-hmm. And Rosalind, what about you? How did you first get started in music?
I had a similar start as Kelly. My mother also is very musical and got myself and my sibling involved in music at a very early age. We listened to all kinds of music in our house. She sang opera. And we got involved playing music at our church too. I grew up in an Episcopal church, and we had a great choir director who also did a recorder ensemble. So as a rather small person, I was given a recorder before we ever got them in elementary school, and learned how to play that instrument a little bit. And we did lots of singing and had instruments in the home. I took piano lessons in elementary school, and things just escalated from there.
So what do you mean by escalated? So I know you're also a bassoon player. What was that your first experience seriously studying an instrument?
No, I studied clarinet before I studied bassoon. And I also tried to teach myself Irish uilleann bagpipes as a young teenager. I worked at the grocery store, earned many pennies, and ordered an instrument from a maker in Newfoundland who made simple instruments, and I tried to teach myself. And how in the world, as a young girl in Iowa, would I know about the uilleann pipes? It was probably because of that varied musical background that I had as a child, listening to a lot of different music. And we also heard the Chieftains when I was relatively young, the Irish band, the Chieftains. So I heard their group and saw their bagpiper play and was absolutely smitten with it. And I probably have just had a strange interest in double reed instruments my whole life. So I was drawn to the bagpipes, which is a double reed. I was drawn to first the oboe, actually. I dabbled in everything in middle school. I played the clarinet and was doing great with clarinet. It was lots of fun, but I kept exploring the musical instrument, like I would call it the library at my school. There was a loft full of all these old band instruments. There were smashed sousaphones. There were things in cases that looked very strange. I tried playing the alto clarinet, which is hardly a useful instrument. My band director told me, stop doing that, Rosalind. You need to play the clarinet. And then I found a bassoon in that same locker room as a long rectangular case, and being a self-professed music nerd at that point in my young life, I knew exactly what it was. Nobody in my school had played it for years and years, and I asked if I could take it home and try it, and I completely fell in love with it. I remember being able to play the first few notes of The Sorcerer's Apprentice by the end of the evening, messing around with it, but I don't know if that's entirely true or not. Doing that, I was always fascinated by instruments and how they worked. I just wanted to try them all. And I played a bunch of woodwind instruments when I was in middle school and high school, and then really settled on the bassoon and went to school for bassoon.
Where did you go to school? Where did you do your undergraduate?
I did my undergraduate degree at the University of Iowa.
Mm-hmm.
I studied with Benjamin Coelho, bassoonist there, and then I went on to graduate school at New England Conservatory.
And did your undergraduate experience give you any more exposure to the other side of your musical life that was to come?
Absolutely. I actually learned Great Highland bagpipes when I was in high school and carried that on through college. I was the last member of the University of Iowa Scottish Highlanders pipe band, and tried to recruit some friends to enliven the band and program that had been at the school, but there weren't that many people that were interested in joining me. So I continued to play bagpipes with the Iowa Scottish Pipes and Drums pipe band,
Mm-hmm.
and another group in Grinnell, Iowa called Turlock pipe band. So I continued to learn folk music, especially on the Scottish pipes, all through that time. I was really obsessed with it. It was actually quite a challenge for me to balance wanting to be involved in that music and being a serious student of the bassoon, because I was a performance major on the bassoon. And I had every intent at that point in my life to be an orchestral bassoonist, or someone that played lots of instruments and did things like played in the pit in musicals or operas. Things like that were really fascinating to me too.
And I'm just going to guess, looking ahead, you've probably gotten to do a lot of all of that, haven't you?
It's true.
Yeah.
I'm very lucky.
Yeah, I feel the same way about my life, so I know exactly what you mean. And Kelly, how about you? When did you first find the harp? Or I guess we really haven't talked about when you started formally studying music.
My mom would have sworn that I told her when I was 2 that I had to have a harp or I would die.
Okay.
Apparently I was a little bit of a melodramatic child.
Okay.
I don't know anything about that given my current situation with my child. But do you think he's melodramatic, Rosalind?
Absolutely.
Perhaps it runs in the family. I don't know. But I definitely got introduced through the Stone Mountain Highland Games.
Okay.
I grew up in Tucker, so they were right on our doorstep.
Mm.
We lived just on the main street, down from Ponce there, and there was a woman out there, Sandra Sparks is her name. She's I've known her for decades now, and she's still a friend. That had a harp out there one year, and I just fell head over heels for it, and apparently told my mom that I had to have one or I would die every year till I was about 10. When they finally decided, well, she might not be crazy. I guess we have to find a harp teacher, which was a big deal in Atlanta in the 80s to find a harp teacher. So, I took piano and ukulele and a few little things like that before then, but it was definitely all harp all the time, at least up to middle school.
Okay.
I was really fortunate when I first started playing to find a teacher who had both studied traditional and classical music on a very high level. So my teacher was a student of Marcel Grandgenet, who's one of the big harp teachers in the U.S.
Okay.
But she had also been in Scotland and studied in Scotland, so I was lucky enough to get both sides of the harping tradition, which puts you in kind of a weird place with the classical community. So I kind of grew up in both communities, and I hope things are different in Atlanta now because of it. Because, there's always this thing where it's pedal harp or lever harp, and lever harp is just a step to get to the pedal harp. There definitely used to be some, I don't want to say animosity, but maybe lack of respect between the pedal harp community and the folk harp community.
Okay.
Although it's much better these days, and there's a lot more crossover than there was when I was a kid.
And did you start with the lever harp? I don't know how harpists begin, actually.
I started with the lever harp because my parents were not going to invest in a pedal harp until it was obvious that I needed one.
Okay.
And we didn't really have the money for a pedal harp growing up, so I played lever harp, and I played on my teacher's pedal harps until I went to college, when I went out and got a loan and bought my first pedal harp.
Okay.
Because back then an 18-year-old could get a loan for a pedal harp
There you go.
and use the harp as collateral. I can't imagine that happening anymore. Yeah. But I got my undergraduate in pedal harp from the University of Georgia.
Okay.
I don't know that I ever really wanted to play full-time in an orchestra. I love the music, and I don't necessarily love the process for the harp. It's a whole lot of sitting and reading and counting.
Okay.
And it's just, it's not my repertoire. But I couldn't see any other way to make a living playing the harp.
Okay.
And I knew that I needed to make a living playing the harp. I studied cello pretty seriously in high school. I played trombone and anything else the band director needed on the marching field. Okay. Including bass drum one year.
I love it.
And I studied trombone through college too, actually. Now I really kind of want to sack butt, but that's another story altogether.
I didn't know that you played trombone.
Kelly does not need any more instruments.
I think we both have an instrument problem, but
we definitely have an
Well,
instrument.
the next interview will be at my house, and I'll make you both feel as though you do not have a problem. You can feel very good about yourselves. I love it though. So
Yeah.
So trombone, and did you play in UGA's marching band?
No, because by that point it was all harp all the time. I was just studying trombone with a friend.
Okay.
Being the harpist at a major university, you are sometimes the only harpist at a major university, and you end up playing with all of the ensembles all the time.
Oh yeah.
So I played with the medieval groups. I played with the contemporary chamber ensemble. We had George Crumb come and stay in residence with us for a week, and it was life-changing. He's amazing.
Yeah.
But it was all harp all the time at that point.
Okay.
I'm not sure that I ever really thought about how to make a living at it at that point. I just wanted to play the harp.
Okay. It's the innocence of youth is great because you'll invest in things that you're not exactly sure what the return will be at that point, and it doesn't matter.
Yes. And my parents were wonderfully supportive of that.
So were mine. I think my mother had wanted to major in music or musical theater and was denied that opportunity because it wasn't practical. So when it came time for me to look into what I wanted to do professionally or to study in college, she was extremely in support of me studying music.
So you said you had a sibling, and you both were musicians growing up. Did you duet, or was that not possible?
We did not. My younger brother did come and be a part of the productions of La Boheme and Tosca that we did when we were children, and he played flute in middle school band for a while and got a trumpet, but mostly just so that he could play pranks on me by hiding at the bottom of the stairs and blasting my ear as I came down. He tried guitar a little bit as well, but it never really took for him. My brother is very interested, I suppose, in things more like computers and programming and that kind of level of intricacy, similar but different than music. So that's where he ended up going.
It's funny how many parallels she and I find between our lives. I mean, she grew up in Iowa and I grew up here, and there's almost 10 years between us. And you know what my brother's instrument was, right, Rosalind?
I think so.
My brother was a piper.
Yeah,
Okay.
And
Dad, I was like, did he study anything besides bagpipes?
no, it was all bagpipes, and he used to hide around corners to scare me with it. Just like she's talking about her brother.
Wow. Siblings will never change.
No, it's true.
Yeah.
Little brothers are the same the world over, I think.
Yeah. When you were younger, did you duet?
The Great Highland Bagpipes and the harp? No.
Okay, I guess that
No.
is probably not the best combination.
No, well, it was more of a rivalry situation. I had a sign on my door growing up that said "Pipers gleefully beheaded."
Okay.
You know?
It had to have been really fun growing up in your household.
It was entertaining.
Okay.
It was a fun place for sure.
Yeah. And what were your first steps after college? Like you graduated, you had this degree in harp. Then what happened?
I moved to Grant Park and tried to gig for a living,
Okay.
and I did for a
Okay.
while. You know, it's not a fabulous living. It's a very busy and manic sort of lifestyle because you take everything.
Absolutely.
But I'd been teaching for about 4 years at that point, and I started building my teaching studio in earnest and playing every wedding I could get my hands on. And
Okay.
it only took me about 3 years to decide that I hated it.
Okay.
Um,
Were most of your jobs on pedal harp or?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I kind of lost track of folk music for a couple of years there. I think studying classical music is all encompassing.
Okay.
And being the only harpist at school at the time was certainly all encompassing for me. And there was no time for it.
Okay.
I hated it, but there was no time for it.
Yeah. Wow.
So it took me a while to get that back after I graduated.
Okay. Okay.
It's definitely an effort.
And Rosalind, what about you? When you finished college, what was your next move?
Well, the first time I really felt like I had completely entered, what would be the musical workforce was when I was done with graduate school. And I stayed in Boston for another year, probably another solid year after I graduated, and I got an arts administration job at New England Conservatory. I was the alumni relations coordinator. I got that job because I'd done some internships doing administrative work for a chamber music group in Boston, the Chameleon Arts Ensemble. And it was a really great way to be involved in a musical organization and have a job, which was very, very helpful, and then still be looking for performing and teaching work on top of that. So I was doing gigs in small regional orchestras. I was doing, kind of that, like piecing it together and doing lots of freelance work. And I was also head over heels into playing in a new pipe band in Boston at that time. And I was also, that was like right when I started to discover the Scottish small pipes more deeply. People had talked about them to me before, and I went to a workshop in Maine and was introduced to the instrument in person and became immediately and completely smitten with them. So there were some interesting things sort of percolating there in my last year, or the year after I completed my graduate degree, and started to look and see what was possible in the world of work, but also exploring, like really, really kind of getting back into folk music. It was like a gravitational pull I couldn't resist.
And you were in Boston for another year. Did you come to Asheville after that? Was that your move to Asheville?
I did. That was my move to Asheville. I met a bagpipe maker and performer at a Scottish small pipe workshop at the Piper's Gathering. It was held in Killington, Vermont that year, I think, and I met him. His name's E.J. Jones, and he lives in Asheville, and he's a Scottish small pipe instrument maker. So he and I became fast friends, and he invited me to come visit in Asheville and check out his workshop, and he really wanted to see me make a bassoon reed.
Sounds like a fair trade.
Yeah, fair trade. So we did kind of this funny trade where I, got to check out his workshop and visit Asheville and really have a great time, and I showed him how, like, my reed making process. It was perfectly nerdy. And at that point, he was sort of encouraging me, like, why don't you come down to Asheville and we'll do work together, and there's got to be an outlet for a bassoon here. And I started asking around in the classical community if there was a need for bassoon players, and I got a really strong yes. And Being in Boston, I loved it. It was fantastic, but it was definitely a like wait in line situation for performing and teaching. There were many like myself who had received a degree from one of the wonderful schools of music in that area and had stayed and tried to do professional work for many, many years. So there's all this incredible pool of wonderful musicians, and I loved being a part of that, but it was also really interesting for me to see that if I moved to Asheville, I could both play and be involved in folk music much more, and also that there was a need for someone to come and be a bassoon performer and teacher in the area, and I thought I would love to try it. So I moved 10 years ago, and I haven't moved away from Asheville.
Okay, and Asheville does have a reputation as being very rich in folk music culture and visual arts and anything handmade. So people from this Atlanta area flock to Asheville to get their fill of culture all the time.
Well, yes, it's incredible that way. I love the handicraft culture and fine art and music of all kinds here. It's really rich with that. So it's a great environment.
So fast forward, how did the two of you meet?
You want me to tackle that?
Absolutely, go for it.
We were both touring with the fiddler Jamie Laval,
Okay.
who is a fantastic Scottish fiddler and classical musician. And I think one of the reasons we both ended up on his tour was that we both speak both languages.
Okay.
But we met and we toured together for 2 years before we actually made anything happen, I think. When you're on a tour like that, it's just, it's one thing after the other. There's barely time to eat, much less anything else.
Right now.
But we finally decided we had to get together outside of it, and we had to make it happen. And we met up on her front porch in February, I think, after the Christmas tour that year, and literally just sat on the porch and played constantly all weekend long.
Okay.
And it took us a while to make the harp and the small pipes fit, to figure out how to make them work together. But I think from the very first tune, we were pretty hooked on playing with each other.
Okay. It seems as though I remember hearing you say over the past week or so that maybe this is not the most conventional of combinations of instruments, the small pipes and the harp.
It's definitely not here. You see it more in Scotland.
Okay.
But there's really only one other pair of people that I know of really playing Scottish harp and small pipes together in the States. Would you say that's true? Maybe Joe and
might be some people, doing it in their homes.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I guess Rachel's done some, but yeah, it's not something that happens very often. Partially because there's logistical issues.
Okay.
Most small pipes are much louder than Rosalind's.
Okay.
She's done work on hers to make sure that we can take it down.
Okay, so I'm curious, to interject right here. First of all, what were some of the things that the two of you had to adjust to make your combo work, like you mentioned a moment ago, and what did you do specifically to make your pipes work in that setting better?
I worked with the maker of my instrument, who is Nate Banton. He lives in Portland, Maine. Worked with him to get a reed that was going to just be at a softer volume. Scottish small pipe makers aim to make their bagpipes kind of as loud as possible because they're generally a quiet instrument. They have the reputation for being pretty quiet. Mm-hmm. They actually try to make them louder, more robust sounding, and I said, can we take it back? I really need to have something that is not as loud, that will play a little better with harp, so that she and I could play acoustically and not struggle. Since Kelly has decay and I don't in the sound, it's good for me to just be at a slightly less strong volume. So things that we did were like just getting that reed sort of set down to operate a little more quietly, and I actually the reeds are wrapped on staples. Mm-hmm. We discovered that just taking some fuzz, some fiber, and putting it in the staple end in the reed seat muffled the sound of the reed but didn't really compromise pitch or tone. It was kind of an astonishing discovery. We're like, wow, this really works.
So your air is blowing through this foam. Mm-hmm. Okay. Okay.
It's actually just like a little piece of sweater pill, like wool.
Okay.
Yeah, a little bit of wool fuzz. And I would never have thought, but it really dampened the volume a little bit, and the tone of the instrument was really not compromised. So those were some of the simple things that we did just to try to make it a little bit easier. That way Kelly doesn't have to work quite as hard to produce volume
Okay.
to compete with the bagpipes. We don't want it to be a competition.
Well, and I think one of our biggest discoveries over the past few years has been, well, one of the things we're constantly trying to figure out is how to make it compatible and not competitive.
Mm-hmm.
And it's things like I have all sorts of textures of sound that she can't produce. So using different textures on the harp, going lower on the string, or buzzing the strings, or banging on the soundboard, or damping strings really fast and stopping my sound
Okay.
makes a huge difference, because she's got nothing but this long sustained drone. Anytime you do something like that on the harp, it really stands out and makes a different sound.
Okay.
So trying to fit the two together to make them work has been really interesting. The other thing I think that's been big has been ornamentation, learning each other's ornamentation. Rosalind trying to do harp ornaments on the bagpipes, and me learning to do burls and the pipe ornaments on the harp. And I think that's something that you don't see very often is instruments crossing ornamentation like that.
Oh, so even in Ireland or Scotland, typically those ornaments are not borrowed from one instrument to another?
There are some ornaments that are absolutely borrowed across all of the instrumental traditions, but there are some very particular pipe things that you don't hear anywhere else. And there's a couple of fairly particular harp things that you really don't hear anywhere else.
Okay. Probably a little later, I'll ask both of you to demonstrate a couple of those, because that's as an early musician myself, like I see a really clear distinction between what you do and what I do. But then there's a very common aspect in that ornamentation is both part of what we do, but you know, we as early musicians tend to borrow ornaments from other instruments, and it just tends to be anything goes. But I guess you're severely limited by the instruments being so different.
Well, and sometimes it's the same ornament, but the way it's executed is so different that the sound is different.
Okay.
Like she can play a triplet on the pipes, but that involves 5 notes? Technically? Like a triplet on the same, that would be 3 fingers on the same string for me, for her has cuts in between.
Okay.
So there's 5 different notes involved in that triplet.
Okay.
So it's just that they're executed very differently, which makes them sound very different.
Okay.
So trying to sort of mimic the sound of each other's instruments has been really fun.
Okay. Well, I like the interplay, and it obviously you have thought through this, so the effect must come across quite well. Like I mean, the performance I heard you guys do together the other day was outstanding, and if there was anything you had to do to make something work, that does not show even a little bit.
Excellent.
So natural.
It's falling into place these days, for sure.
Okay. And have you gotten since the pandemic began and put us all doing nothing and waiting for the next step, have you guys gotten to do a live performance other than the one that we witnessed last week?
Do you want to tackle that since they were on your turf?
Absolutely. Yes, Kelly and I were very lucky that we did get the chance to perform a little bit in early June. We played a porch concert for Panharmonia's summer porch series is almost what it's turned into. There's a great chamber music organization in Asheville called Panharmonia. It's run by flutist Kate Steinbeck.
Okay.
And I've been working with her for years, and she offered to Kelly and I, like, please come and we'll set up a concert on the porch. And that was our first opportunity to play together for the public, for a real audience since the pandemic. And that same weekend we also played a small private concert for an estate here in Asheville, sort of a community called the Tom's Estate here. So we had a really great live audience 2 days in a row. It was really incredible. to all of a sudden have some performing work like that. We really loved it. And then, of course, this past week, playing on the Trexler lecture for Mountain Collegium was wonderful.
What about independently? Has your performance life picked up, Rosalind?
It has, yes, just really probably since May.
Mm-hmm.
Things are starting to happen again. I played a wind octet concert, gosh, I can't even remember, 2 weekends ago. Have some other chamber music coming up this summer, and I'm starting to hear about bassoon performances, and also we're going to be doing more performing this coming week. Kelly and I are both playing Friday, Saturday, and Sunday at the Grandfather Mountain Highland Games.
Oh, wow.
We're very excited.
I bet you are excited. Every performance right now seems so exciting.
And every performance with Rosalind is exciting. Every performance we get to do together is exciting anyway, because we spend so much time either trying to make a living or dealing with kids or all these other things in our life. When we get together to play folk music, it's there's a big come down after it for us, and we both get kind of blue for a couple of days.
Okay.
We love it so much.
So the folk performances I've seen in my life, they're very interactive. The performers are really just as much a part of the audience, or they bring the audience into the performance very effectively. Was that something natural for the two of you to do, or did you both have to learn that skill from somebody?
I feel like I always liked to interact with audiences that way. Even when I would give solo bassoon recitals, I would really try to include a lot of information and do a little bit of storytelling, especially after I was out of school. That was definitely a more formal situation when you would give a recital, but when I was giving performances in Asheville, I just definitely felt the need to connect with the audience in that way, and it felt very natural to try to draw everyone in and to make it a really interesting mutual experience. I do a concert every year where I present a bassoon quartet, which includes myself, and we always make it extremely interactive because the bassoon is not as familiar as some instruments to the general audience, so you have to talk about it and share your experience and your story with the instrument too, and I think that's just gotten me into doing it more and more with the folk music as well.
I can't believe you're going to talk about that quartet without saying the name of it.
Okay, well, it's the Bassooniverse, and each concert is sort of themed. I think the first one was Welcome to the Bassooniverse, and then the next one was like Back to the Bassooniverse or Return. I don't know. We come up with silly things. Bassoon world is definitely more jovial and relaxed. And
I've seen bassoon quartets before, and their names are almost always memorable. And what opportunities do you have to bring new people into your music? So personally, one of my own goals is to bring as many new people who aren't musicians at all into doing what I do, or at least doing something. What opportunities do you have and are able to take advantage of, or where you bring people into your musical world?
I think our private teaching studios are a big part of that.
Okay.
But workshops like Collegium are something we absolutely love. We're going out in September to Colorado to teach for a week at Spanish Peaks, harp and pipe retreat. And we so look forward to workshops like that, because it's generally, there's always the people in the room that are terrified to be there and really just need confidence. They need somebody to tell them they're not terrible.
Okay.
They need the confidence boost, and we do a lot of things like that and absolutely love it. But there's always that little girl in every performance too, that kind of hangs around the edge of the stage and really wants to come up and see things. And
do you find yourself letting a lot of kids play your harp after
constantly.
A concert and such?
Absolutely, because that's the great thing about the harp. While the technique is really difficult, you kind of can't make a bad noise on it to start with,
Okay.
So it's magical for so many kids.
Okay.
And that's how I fell in love with it.
Yeah, I've heard from one harpist, they'll always tune their strings in the pentatonic scale, so when they demonstrate, every note sounds great, so everyone wants to play the harp.
That must have been a pedal harp player.
I don't think it was a pedal harp player,
Really?
but it seemed like it was just a good trick to make people
dedication.
sound very good.
That sort of tuning.
I could be getting a little bit of that wrong.
No, that's okay.
I'm guessing Kelly does not pass around either her bassoon or her pipes around to audience goers after the concert.
No, I can't really share those. It's much harder. If I have a whistle though, then that's something that if especially pre-pandemic, here, try my whistle. They could make a sound on it. Although I do have our fabulous colleague Will Peebles has let some of my students, after our bassoon quartet performances, play his contrabassoon. So
Oh,
it's really fantastic to get to share like that and see young people excited about instruments in general. And I love, like, I'll let kids come up and touch my bagpipes, or like what I'll do is I'll have them squeeze the bag.
hmm
So I'll fill it up with air and then be like, okay, now squeeze it, and then it makes the sound, and it just is kind of a fun way to interact.
and not exactly in the vein of performer that you are. Do you ever, or have you ever tried, or do you ever play the earlier bassoons, the Dulcian or Baroque bassoon?
Oh, I wish. I would very much love to. I've been fascinated with Dulcian and also Baroque bassoon for a long time, but having an instrument problem like I do, it's sort of you have to do one thing at a time, and I haven't quite gotten to that yet.
Oh, so it sounds like it's not out of the question.
Oh, it's not out of the question. I have a triple harp. She needs a dulcian.
Okay.
I work sometimes with Istampita Early Music Ensemble, and I
Okay.
play early bagpipes and attempt to play the recorder and sing a little bit. And the director of that group is always after me to get a Dulcian. So I know it's going to happen someday.
You didn't hear it from me, but I think Will Peebles has more than one Dulcian. And I believe he can only play one at a time.
I've seen a portion of Will's bassoon collection, and it is mighty.
Oh yeah, I've been in his home and I've seen his bassoon collection that's in there. It's amazing. So what is your latest acquisition since you have an instrument problem?
Well, since the well in the within the last year, the pandemic year, I got a chanter
Mm-hmm.
for my bagpipes. It's right here. Da, 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 da. It is a border pipe chanter. Now, this is not the same thing as the Scottish small pipe chanter. It's a conical bore
Mm-hmm.
instrument, and so it sounds an octave higher than the small pipes, and you can cross finger to get a few accidentals. So that's
Very exciting for
a
us.
really exciting feature. It also has a key on it, which is very abnormal for bagpipes. It allows me to play a extra step higher on the instrument, which is just a thrill for me because normally I only have 9 or 10 notes on the small pipes, depending on what I'm playing. So that adds a whole note.
Well, to someone who wouldn't know any better, what you held up looked just like what a Renaissance musician would call a cornemuse, which is a crumhorn that's straight. Could you show us that instrument a little more? And we even have the additional key frequently to extend the range to one more note.
That's really fabulous. Well, this since this is for a bellows blown instrument, you would never mouth blow
Okay.
this. It does look like a cap double reed, doesn't it? The reed is inside. Here, I could even take this off for all of the folks out there that are curious. The reed is inside this chamber, but I plug this into the bag on the bagpipe, so it is always indirectly blown. I don't know if we can all kind of see if the camera is focusing on that little reed or
Okay.
not. It plugs into the bagpipe, which I have one of a couple bagpipes over here. Yeah, instrument acquisition. And then my other thing, just while I'm putting this in here, I have a friend who has loaned me a set of Northumbrian small pipes, and I've been playing those a little bit last year as well. Yeah, so this then plugs into the bag
hmm
and is played along with the drones in my Scottish small pipe. So I'm gonna get a set of drones made specifically for this chanter, but it was one step at a time with that too, because it's a rather lengthy wait list to get the drones made. But I was able to sneak in and get a chanter within this year. I was very lucky.
And do you make your own reed, or are those best made by the person who made the instrument?
Yeah, the reeds for these instruments are made by the maker and are very specific to each chanter. So luckily, these reeds, when set up well, made well, they will last for a very long time. So I could have this reed in fine operation for many years. So it really doesn't necessitate my own reed making. I actually am interested in getting into making reeds for some of these bagpipes some point. I make all of my own bassoon reeds
Okay.
for my bassoon, of course, which is kind of a completely different scene because those wear out much more quickly, and you kind of need to tailor them for different situations. But these reeds, once they're set and they're good to go, you can leave them and play them for many years.
What are those reeds made of?
Rondo Donax, same as bassoon, clarinet, saxophone, the same kind of reed cane. So it's
Okay.
the same material.
Oh, and do you have to soak them or anything before you use them, or are they dry play?
They're dry, set up to play dry, and that's one reason why they last so long is that they're not subjected to all the expand and contract that happens when you're soaking and drying out a reed. So they're set up to play without moisture.
And Kelly, what about you? What is your latest acquisition for your instrument problem that you have?
They're right behind you on that table. It's a set of Scottish small pipes
Okay.
by the maker she was talking about earlier, E.J. Jones.
Okay.
In Nashville made them for me.
Okay, so you'll show those to us a little later, I'm hoping,
Yeah.
or you can show them to us now.
Whichever you'd like.
Okay, let's look at those now.
Yeah, Kelly got bitten by the bug.
I did. I've kind of always wanted to play them. But, it was my brother's thing growing up, so we couldn't do that.
Okay.
So we've got the chanter and the bag, of course, and the 4 drones that go over the shoulder. The drones are A, A, E, and D. Yay, I did it. The A's are in octaves. I'm very, very new at this.
Okay.
And it's an amazing thing. They're really, really, really difficult and really fun.
Okay.
I think I spent 3 weeks when I first got them just trying to make the bellows and the bag work to get a steady tone.
Okay.
So I literally spent 3 weeks of the pandemic sitting in front of my tuner trying to play an A. And that was it.
Okay.
But the bellows, here are the bellows, they go under your arm and you pump them and fill the bag. And the hardest part for me is that the bellows movement has nothing to do with the music.
Okay.
It has to just become innate.
Mm.
It's like
Like you're just constantly
you're
moving
just
the bellows.
constantly moving it.
So you're really just separating
Yeah.
one complete body action. Okay.
Exactly. And that's so foreign to a harp player. Everything is engaged when you play the harp. You play the pedal harp and your feet go with the music, and it's completely foreign, but
Okay.
completely fascinating. So this and the fiddle back there have been my pandemic projects.
Oh, so Rosalind has infected you with this little bug to play
Yes.
some pipes. Have you started the harp yet?
There is a harp in my house. It has been plucked a few times, and my youngest stepdaughter has also sort of taken an interest in it and has had a couple little Zoom lessons with Kelly. Yes, but it's in there. I would love to learn some basic harp technique so I can really understand Kelly better and understand what she does on the instrument even more. So I think that our interest in each other's instruments is pretty great in that regard. So we can kind of have a deeper language and understanding of what the other does. So there's a harp in my home. It needs to be played a little more.
We'll look at one of Kelly's harps in a minute, but let's talk about your whistle playing. When did whistle fit into all of this?
Well, I started dabbling in whistle when I was probably a teenager, and it was kind of a mutual interest in Irish music that was blossoming in my household. My mom bought whistle for herself and a set of Susato whistles as well. And they were around, so I would pick them up and play them, and it felt very innate to me. It was a really wonderful way to make this beautiful sound, and I would listen to recordings of whistle players and try to mimic their playing, and I just always had a whistle handy. And so as I started to get more interested in playing, it's like chamber folk music. It's not playing in bagpipe bands, because that is a completely different scene than what I'm involved in now with Kelly, although I still play in a pipe band. We started to incorporate the whistle into our music together because it was another way for at least me to add variety to the playing. And I also played a lot when we were doing our tour with Jamie Laval. I would play the whistle, just another thing to bring in that's not the bagpipes but one of those voices that really evokes that Celtic music sound, and being able to play tunes on the whistle has always been wonderfully enjoyable. And I really love, bringing that into what Kelly and I do. And it's a great session instrument. So as a folk musician, I think of any kind, there are lots of music sessions that people go to share music with each other and to share a good time. And the whistle is a very handy instrument for that. You can just put it in your pocket. You can get one for $10. And it's a simple system instrument, and you can go, the gambit from, just learning a few tunes on it to becoming like extremely expert at it, just like you see people do with recorder.
So a lot of our folks who are involved in the Atlanta Early Music Alliance would be recorder players, or probably relate a little better to recorder than they do the whistle. What are some of the differences that the people should know about the two instruments?
Well, the whistle, the fingering system is different on the whistle. So we have 6 tone holes on the whistle. There is no back thumb hole. Mm-hmm. And it is not possible to do any cross fingering on this instrument to get a chromatic scale. So it's really a diatonic instrument. You get a whistle per key you want to play in. So this whistle is in the key of D. That means that my 6 fingers down note is D. Mm-hmm. And then diatonically we'll just follow the D major scale on this whistle. There's one place on the whistle where you can do a different fingering to get either a raised or lowered 7th for that D major scale. So you can play a mixolydian scale or a proper major scale. Or that's really the only extra fingering option. And then like recorder 2, you can overblow to get a 2nd octave. And back down to the bottom. So I think that's some of the similarities and differences there. We have, of course, it's a fiddle instrument. And I suppose a big difference would be that on whistle, you're not articulating all the time. Because if I understand correctly, on recorder, you're mostly articulating each note and using different styles of articulation to give yourself variety in the sound. On the whistle, you're mostly articulating with your fingers with grace notes and taps and rolls. You also use a tongued articulation on the whistle too, but it's not used as frequently. Some whistle players will do other extended techniques like double or triple tonguing to really emphasize notes and just add variety and sparkle. So there's a lot of different things that we would do on whistle to create variety, and it's mostly with finger articulation and things like slides and finger vibrato too. So those are some of the things that you would add. I could explain more about it, but maybe we want to save that for a little later. What do you say, Jody?
Yeah, I think I'd like for you to show me a few of those techniques a little later. So try those in real time.
Real
time. In
real
REEL time. And I would love to know a little more about your harps. Like, is there with you and Rosalind, is there one harp you play most of the time, and or all of the time?
Not all of the time, but certainly most of the time.
Okay.
Can I just hand these to you?
Absolutely.
Actually? Have some bagpipes. You can just.
I've never held bagpipes before, so I feel honored. I love it. Thank you.
Aren't they beautiful?
They are beautiful.
EJ's turning is, I think, particularly lovely.
Wow.
They're all hand turned on a lathe, of
Oh,
course.
wow. I love it.
And I helped make them. I did. I probably turned the billets round, and then I did all the finish sanding on them.
That's why they're so shiny.
That is amazing.
Isn't it?
Wow. So, any of your instruments, do you have a hand in making them?
No, actually. This is sort of a funny thing between me and this pipe maker, EJ, is that when I got into Scottish small pipes, I met a different maker before I ever met him. And so I'd put in an order for a set of Scottish small pipes from this other maker, Nate Banton. And he and I are fantastic friends too. So I received this instrument from him and absolutely loved it. So, and then moved to Asheville and started working with EJ. And I was conflicted. Like, what do I do? Do I get another set of bagpipes? I love my pipes and my connection with my friend through them. I should probably eventually get a set made by EJ that I could help make myself.
Absolutely. I think that's the coolest thing.
It's really great. Yeah. But it's fun for me to see friends and colleagues in the folk music scene with EJ's pipes and know that I had a little hand in making their instrument.
Well, Kelly, show us some of your harp. It looks like a lever harp.
This is a lever harp. This is a lever harp made by the pedal harp maker Kamek, which is the French pedal harp maker.
Okay.
This one is probably 40 years old, and I purchased it from a harp rental company that was going out of business.
Okay.
Because I just fell in love with it. It's do you want me to explain?
Sure, I'd love to.
Basics of how a harp works?
Yeah. How does it work? And,
Okay. Harps are fundamentally a diatonic instrument. You have the levers at the top that can raise or subsequently lower your pitch half a step. But if you have accidentals in your music, you have to stop playing with at least one of your hands, reach up and grab that, and then go back to it. So we keep lever harps tuned generally to E flat major, so that I can play down to 3 flats and up to 4 sharps.
Okay.
So that range covers just about all of the folk music that you could possibly want to do. You almost never get to play in either of those. Sorry, the dog is going completely nuts.
That's okay. We're not doing the interview at my house. The dog would be going nuts.
Excellent. Well, it's only because he's locked upstairs in a room where he can't get to the windows. But the lever harp, you use the levers to get the sharps and the flats, and so it's really interesting, particularly playing with Rosalind, because her instrument is mixolydian in essence, but that doesn't mean you're not playing in A major. So I end up with the melody half of the harp, the top half of the harp with G naturals, and the bottom half with G sharps.
Okay.
And then sometimes it reverses, depending on where I am and what I'm doing.
Okay.
And then, so there's a whole lot of flipping levers while I'm playing when she and I are doing things together. But this is kind of the modern harp in its simplest form, I think. It gets a lot more complicated if you want to get into that, but this is the harp that I play most of the time with Rosalind, because it's got the biggest and the deepest sort of bass and the best sound of any of my harps, I think, for sure.
Okay. And I just know this from having studied music, but I know a lot of people don't. How do you keep up with where you are on the instrument?
Oh, the red strings are C and the black ones are F.
Okay.
Because we don't have all those handy little black keys like on the piano to give you a relationship to them. Otherwise, it would be just a sea of translucent strings.
Okay.
Which is kind of what it does when certain stage lights hit it.
I would imagine.
Yeah. The colored strings disappear on you, so it looks like there's holes in between the white strings.
Oh.
Which is really, really fun.
Okay.
But there were harps back in the 60s actually that had green strings with purple and red colors.
Okay.
Which was really interesting. I played a couple of those.
What was there an advantage?
Not really.
Or under stage lights, then did colors
60s.
just look generic?
I don't know.
Okay, it was the 60s. Okay. That was the best explanation ever.
There was no explanation. They just tried something different.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And how often do you have to change strings?
It depends on the type of string. These on this particular harp, this is the other reason this is the harp that we tend to travel with. These are carbon fiber strings. So they last longer and weather better in general than the gut strings. The gut strings in this part of the country go pretty quickly.
Okay.
The triple harp behind you is strung entirely in gut, and it breaks strings frequently.
Okay.
And you replace them when you break, but gut strings really don't last more than about 2 years down here.
Okay.
If that. You can hear the sound quality start to decay. But carbon fiber, I'm getting, I guess, maybe 4 or 5 years out of a set of strings, which is pretty great.
So you need a lot of jobs just to buy strings.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
I see you've purchased gut strings before.
I have for violas da gamba and similar instruments, and they're not cheap. Just to buy 4 strings is a fortune.
Yeah. And that's probably equivalent to like the bottom 4 strings on the triple harp over there.
Yeah.
But the ones on the bass are wire wrapped and will last a good long time.
Okay. And I see you have some other harps. I see back here a pedal harp. I see looks like a medieval lap harp, but it's probably something else.
So this pedal harp was built in 1832 in London, and I was lucky enough to have a friend at Pilgrim Harps when I lived in Wales, who knew I was looking for one and found this harp for me, and I'm madly in love with it. I actually gigged with it for years, though I don't anymore. The modern pedal harp is sort of a mechanical wonder. You've got the pedals at the bottom, which go in a little stairwell pattern. If they're all the way up, then the string is flat, and the middle is natural, and all the way down is sharp. And you have one pedal for each note in the scale. Your early music buffs will appreciate that this one actually has a slot for an 8th pedal, which is where the damper would have been originally. So it would have had dampers on the sound box. But you've got a pedal for each note in the scale. The pedals are attached to springs in the base that are attached to cables. These days they actually use airline cable that goes up all the way through the column, so the column is hollow. And then you get up to the top, and the cables are attached to, if you can see, these brass plates underneath. And when you move the pedal, the brass plates move the dials, and the dials engage the string to raise it half step or a whole step. So you can have D flat, D natural, and D sharp all out of the same string. There are lots of advantages, obviously, and also some disadvantages. You have to have a mechanic work on them every year. But it's always funny to me what music works on the pedal harp and what music doesn't. I hate playing Handel on the pedal harp.
Okay.
Because it just feels like it's thump, 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 and pedals all the time. But on the triple harp that it was written for, it's a beautiful flowing thing.
Okay.
And it makes so much more sense. So the things where you have to be in 2 different keys at once, like you have an A major bass line going with the A Mixolydian melody, doesn't work on pedal harp.
Okay.
It's simpler music, it's folk music, you'd think it would, but it just absolutely doesn't. And this one is a wire harp. It was made by John Witcher, and it is definitely not in tune, but I'll give you a little taste of what it sounds like. So the wire harp technique involves fingernails, which I do not have, because you don't really use it on any of these other harps. And a lot of damping, because as you can see, there's string decay, but not
that, yeah.
Not nearly the level of decay you get on the other harps. So this would have been an earlier instrument, particularly known in Irish music.
Okay. Okay. And you said the triple harp would be used for not only folk music that you play, but also Baroque music that...
Yes, it's a
Okay.
slightly different physical style of harp. If you want to come over here, this one was made by Robert Cunningham here in Atlanta.
Okay.
And this is a beautiful instrument in the Welsh tradition. This one was made in Wales in about 1980. And it's one of those things that they attempted to get the sharps and flats into the harp to make it a little more, to make the music as it changed a little more accessible. So you have 2 rows of diatonic strings. Most of the time. I retuned it for Shira's ground bass class the other day. So you have 2 rows of diatonic strings, usually in G major, and then the row on the inside, see if we're in tune, there are the sharps.
Okay.
So you have C, C, C sharp, D, D, this won't be in tune, D sharp. It's 89 strings, it's a lot to tune.
Wow.
It doesn't get done every day, though I try to get to it as often as I can. It doesn't particularly love the Atlanta humidity with the gut strings.
I could see that.
Yep.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wonderful. And how frequently do you get to use this in a performance?
Oh, not nearly as often as I would like to. My master's is in triple harp performance and traditional musicology.
Okay.
From the University of North Wales, and I got to play this beautiful thing, or one very much like it, exclusively for a couple of years over there. Rosalind and I use it whenever we can, but he's affectionately known as John, because the harp maker was John Thomas.
Okay.
But John is 6'6" and weighs probably about 60 pounds, and he's not easy to get around.
Okay. Okay.
So it's just not is versatile for me as the lever harp. But
So he's for special occasions.
he's for special occasions. He gets to play a lot of Christmas concerts.
Okay, I love it. Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
Great. Well, thank you for showing us those instruments.
No problem.
So now we're going to take a moment, and Kelly and I are going to take advantage of our opportunity to play music together.
Yay.
Something that both of us have had a deficit of over the past few months. And we're going to get Rosalind to make me a little better so Kelly's not too disappointed.
No.
So I have here a tune that Rosalind provided me. Rosalind, first let us know what we're playing.
This tune is called The Lisnagun, and it's written by uilleann piper Brendan Ring from Ireland. And I think I first heard it at a music workshop, and then in subsequent recordings. It's a really popular tune across Irish and Scottish folk music right now, and a lively, simple pentatonic jig. It's a lot of fun to play, even though it's very simple. It's just a delight. So it's in, we're playing our D whistles on this, but it's based in G major. So our tune is balancing around G in this particular melody.
What am I going to expect as a recorder player that I need to approach differently from my normal music?
Right. So the main difference is going to be that you need to resist the urge to articulate. Resist.
So first, just so everybody knows what we're coming from, as a recorder player, this is what I see. That's what I see in the first measure, maybe the first complete idea. And so we're going to make me sound less like a recorder player and more appropriate for this music.
There's going to be a lot more legato playing and much more selective articulation. So we usually use a tongued articulation really only on strong beats. So in a jig like this, kind of a good way for a recorder player to start transitioning to trying to play more stylistically on the whistle would be maybe just articulate every big beat. So beat one, big beat one, and big beat four. Or little beat one, little beat four, I'm sorry, in the jig. So that's a good place to start. And when we have repeated notes, there's a lot of variety that you can put into your playing with repeated notes. And this melody uses a lot of those. You can change the rhythm or learn how to do an articulation where you're not going to just tongue each note in a row. Like the beginning of this tune goes. So we have 3 Gs immediately in a row. So we're going to use finger articulation, or a combination of tonguing and finger articulation to accomplish that. So we're going to take out the tonguing part. You could start the phrase with an articulation, or maybe the third measure you could start with an articulation. But just try to just play by legato style. But when we have those 3 notes in a row, yes, we have to do something to articulate them. So you're going to do a start with a tongued articulation, and then we're going to do a grace note with our G finger, so sounding a brief A, and then tapping with the finger below to create a triplet. So it'll sound like this. You could start the phrase with an articulation, or maybe the third measure you could start with an articulation, but just try to just play by legato style. But when we have those 3 notes in a row, yes, we have to do something to articulate them. So you're going to do a start with a tongued articulation, and then we're going to do a grace note with our G finger, so sounding a brief A, and then tapping with the finger below to create a triplet. So it'll sound like this.
Okay, I almost got it one time.
That's exactly right. What I tell students is toot, grace, tap.
There you
go. Okay, I even got it a little faster. So that in context would be, but not in tempo, just in context. Okay.
Sound like a whistle player.
Okay. So, I seem to have caught you at the very beginning, the first time you demonstrated for me. You actually did one of these finger motions to start even the first note, it seemed. Did you do that instead of tonguing?
Start with a breath attack and also a grace note at the same time. So you beat your air and close the grace note when you want your first note to begin.
So I got a little bit of it. Was that appropriate to do that at the beginning of that measure?
Absolutely. Grace notes and taps or combinations of grace notes, you can kind of use whatever fingers you want above the note that's sounding. Usually the closer to the sounding note, the better, or the more traditional the sound is. So like I wouldn't use a first finger to play a grace note on the lowest note. I would choose one more adjacent to it.
I don't think I knew that.
Oh. It's unlike bagpipe playing, so this is where I have to be a little bit different than what I do on bagpipes, because we very frequently will use a distant grace note to sound a lower note.
Okay, and what other ornaments could go into this? So so the need to use the grace notes and those other articulation substitutes, I'll call them, even though that's probably completely inappropriate to do so. What other common ornaments would work in this jig?
I like to add some slides in this jig. So within our first phrase, we can hear one of those. Very last movement to B, I'm gonna sound an A before it and then roll my finger off of the tone hole to create a slide.
Do I need to be faster with that, or is that about right?
Ultimately, you would want to go much faster, yeah.
Do you slide by pushing your finger forward? I'm used to sliding by pulling my finger back. Is that a technique that people can use?
That's very different. Yes, on this instrument, the slide is accomplished by pushing the finger forward and slowly rolling off of the tone hole. So it's like you're pushing forward and lifting the tip of your finger up to open the tone hole like a door.
So let me now put some of this into context. Let's see what I can do here. Can I do a slide there?
That was very intuitive of you. Yes, absolutely. That's a great slide. Very good.
So I'm learning how to fake Irish music, right? Okay. So Kelly, shall we try to play this together and see what the result is?
Absolutely.
Okay. So Rosalind's going to be the judge.
And we're in.
And it's a good thing we don't have a panel of judges.
I will be your delighted audience.
Why don't you set the tempo?
I will set the first tempo, and then we'll have our tempos. Here we go. Ready, and... Now I have some inspiration to go home and practice my penny whistle and not just play it like a recorder.
Fantastic. That sounded wonderful.
Thank you. I'm sure that was a treat for everybody in its own way. Well, thank you so much, both Kelly and Rosalind, for that fun interview. I know our listeners will enjoy listening to it, and I know that there are a lot of places in the Atlanta area where most of our folks are going to be for them to hear music. But what are a couple of venues that might be some sure shots for them?
Eddie's new place in Duluth, he hosts a fair amount. Red Clay Theater hosts a fair amount of traditional concerts.
Okay.
There's a great session every Tuesday night that I think they're starting back twice a month at the Marley in downtown Decatur.
Okay.
That starts out as an Irish session and occasionally diverges into Scottish and then goes old time, and then they're usually playing Baltic music by about midnight.
Okay.
So it's an interesting session. It's a lot of fun. I think those are probably the best bets. Variety Playhouse typically has some great traditional music come through.
Well, very good.
Yeah.
Well, we'll hope that between those options and the performances the two of you are doing, we hope people get a little more exposure to your music.
Yes,
then.
definitely.
Perfect. Well, it's been a delight having you, and I wish you both the best in your coming resurgence after these months of less. Okay.
Thanks so much, Jody. This
Thank
has been
you.
a lot of fun.
Thank you. And I would like to once again thank all of our listeners and viewers for their support, and we wish you the best.